Over 20 years ago, a circus performer set herself ablaze midair and fell to her death before hundreds of horrified witnesses. Her name was Lily Snow, and that night's tragedy stained our town forever. I was a young officer then, and that memory, her white dress turning to flame, has haunted me ever since. I'm Harold King, retired now from the sheriff's office. After decades in the city, I've returned home hoping for quiet. Yet the town hasn't forgotten Lily. They whisper that her ghost still wanders the square, drifting through the fog in a white dress. They say her spirit can't rest because she was wronged. A few days after my return, an envelope appeared at my door. Inside was a circus ticket dated for the coming week and a single line on the front. Harold King, if you want to know the truth of the past, come watch this performance. The handwriting was faded, the paper old, too old. As if written when Lily still lived. That night, sleep eluded me. I sat alone, turning the envelope over in my hands. It was manila, fragile with age, soft to the touch. Whoever had left it knew exactly where to find me. The ticket wasn't the message, it was the invitation. I thought I had buried the case long ago. But that letter pulled me back to 1999, to the night I watched Lily burn. The circus came to town in midsummer. My friend had tickets, and we went together, unaware that we'd soon be witnesses to horror. Lily appeared during the final act, a young girl dressed in white, lifted by wires to dance through the air to the sound of a piano. Her movements were graceful, ethereal. Then came a spark. In a heartbeat, her dress ignited, and she became a fireball tumbling from the sky. She hit the ground and kept burning. The screams, the smell, I can still feel them. The investigation ruled it suicide. We confirmed Lily had bought gasoline and a lighter earlier that day. She'd been alone before her act, no signs of foul play. It seemed she'd chosen to die. But why? Then came Ben Harris. I caught him taking photos near the circus tents days later, and thought he might have seen something. When I questioned him, he panicked and ran. I brought him in, and the photos we developed froze my blood. Images of Lily, some candid, others intimate, then explicit. She was terrified, no clothes, still a minor. When confronted, Ben confessed to assaulting her. In those days, a confession ended the case. Within months, he was sentenced to death. Every morning, his grandmother would come to the sheriff's office gate and cry pitifully, begging us to help her grandson. But no one bothered to pay attention to her. In the evening, the sheriff's office would take her back. In the winter of 1999, Ben's death sentence was approved and carried out. Since that day, I had never seen the old woman again. Everyone knew that I was the one who arrested Ben and brought him back to the station, so I was considered the person who made the greatest contribution to this case. The local sheriff's office also used that as an excuse to promote me and transfer me to the city. Even so, at that time, I reported to my superiors many times that the fact that those photos were posted everywhere was definitely due to someone in the station leaking them. In addition, there was still one key point that had not been clarified, which was Lily's identity. Most of the people in the circus troupe had temporary residency permits, and their backgrounds were not specific. We didn't know where Lily came from, what her background was. All the information was a blank. The day Ben was executed, I requested leave and went to the execution site myself. It was on that day that I began to have a hunch that Ben and Lily might have known each other. I brewed a cup of coffee and felt deep in my thoughts. If there was really something hidden in the case of that year, I couldn't just sit and wait. I had to find the person who left me that letter. That night, I took a flashlight and went outside. Wind howled through the alley, and then I saw her, a woman in white, standing under the streetlight. Her face, pale and still, was the same as Lily's. My breath caught. "Lily," I whispered. She began to move toward me, her eyes hollow. I stepped forward, asking, "Why did you do it? Why end your life like that?" She didn't answer, she fled. I chased her through the dark until she vanished into an old shack. The surroundings were still pitch black and eerily silent. It was only at this point that I could clearly see in front of me was the abandoned shack. Was there something in there? My back soaked in sweat. I leaned against the wall, panting. After calming down, I turned on my flashlight and walked toward it. Although the house was old, it was quite clean, and it felt as if someone was still living here. Inside were candles, white flowers, and the faint scent of decay. Then I saw it. A black and white photo on the wall, Ben Harris smiling. Behind me, an old voice spoke, "You've come." Along with the hoarse voice, a storm suddenly broke outside the window. When I turned around, a flash of lightning lit up the room. I saw an old woman lying on a dilapidated bed. Just one glance, and I recognized Ben's grandmother. She was still alive, her wrinkled face covered in folds, looking incredibly frightening in the darkness. "You recognize me?" I asked, trembling. "Of course, it was you who arrested Ben that year." The old voice crept into my ears, each word like a knife stabbing straight into my heart. "I'm sorry, I had no choice back then." I lowered my head and replied in a soft voice, but she didn't pay attention to me. She just slowly sat up, her eyes fixed on the photo hanging on the wall. "I don't have much time left. It's almost time for me to go and see Ben. Lily told me, Ben was a good person from beginning to end. I have to let the world know he was wronged." The old woman spoke slowly and wearily, as if she had to struggle with every word. However, every word she said was clear and distinct, but one sentence sent a chill down my spine. "Who told you that, Lily?" That year, when I began to suspect that Lily and Ben might have known each other, even though I had been transferred to the city, I still tried every way to investigate Lily's background. If I couldn't investigate her, I had to start with the other people in the circus troupe. The troupe that Lily was a part of was called the Silver Star Variety Troupe, which consisted of 14 people, including the driver. Among them were animal trainers, horse riders, acrobats, and dancers. To save costs, one person often had multiple roles. There were 9 minors, and the remaining 5 were adults, all from the same local area, which was also the registration location of this circus troupe. Most of the minors in the troupe could not be traced, and those who could were from different places. Among them, there were definitely some who were not there voluntarily, and were even kidnapped or sold into it. This was very common in circus troupes in the 90s, but the sheriff's office couldn't do anything about it. People often say that existence is reasonable. If we investigated too deeply, it might break their business and leave them homeless. But these kinds of circus troupes, whether the performers were voluntary or forced, their recruitment channels were often fixed. Therefore, I decided to go to the city's post office to investigate the organization's registered address, hoping to find some clues. I didn't expect that right there. I would find another shocking piece of information. For 10 years, 88th to 98th, the company that managed this circus troupe had always had regular correspondence with an address in our town. If I remember correctly, they said Lily joined the circus troupe when she was 7 years old. That would also be 1988. In November 1999, after I found the clue at the post office, I still tried to investigate further. Who in this town had been in contact with the circus troupe all this time? This person not only had a high sense of precaution but also held a certain amount of power. All the traceable records in the agencies had been completely erased by him. Just as I was at a dead end, I received bad news. Ben would be executed in 3 days. Because the Lily case had such a huge impact, my superiors wanted to set an example, so they pushed all the legal procedures through at a lightning-fast speed. Ben also became the fastest executed convict I had ever witnessed in my career. On the day of the execution, I took leave beforehand, planning to see him one last time. At the scene, I didn't see his grandmother. Perhaps Ben couldn't bear to let her see that brutal scene. He was led in front of me, escorted, his head pushed down, his clothes torn, his body covered in bruises, exhaustion, and horrific sores. A few corrections officers around him looked at him as if they were looking at a bug. In prison, a rapist is never left alone. From fellow inmates to guards, everyone wanted to teach him a lesson at all costs. The young man in his 20s at that moment had lost even his last bit of dignity. He no longer looked like a human being. I saw that Ben was holding something in his hand. It was a dusty glasses case. It was obvious it had been stepped on by someone else. The corrections officer ordered him to put it on the table and not to bring it inside. All the preparations were carried out more casually than I had imagined. It wasn't until Ben was pushed onto the execution stand that I woke up and asked the sheriff's office in a loud voice, "Don't you have to give the convict a decent last meal before the execution?" "No need. He already ate last night." A corrections officer glanced at me with an indifferent look. Ben heard my voice, turned his head, and looked back. I thought he would yell and curse at me. After all, I was the one who arrested him and brought him to the station. But no, he smiled at me and pointed to the table next to him. "Officer Harold, please give that pair of glasses back to my grandmother. Her eyesight is very poor, and she often gets cursed at by customers when she shines shoes. Don't tell her I bought it, so she doesn't get too sad." The corrections officer interrupted him with an impatient voice. "Is there anything else you want to say?" The sky outside suddenly darkened, and the sound of thunder rumbled from a distance, signaling a big storm was about to fall. Ben looked out the window and whispered 2 sentences. I found out later that it was a poem by a foreign poet. If I can ease one person's pain, or soothe one person's sadness, or help a lost bird return to its old nest, then my life will not be in vain. The drugs flowed, and the rain poured down as if the whole world was exploding in a violent and silent blood. That rain that lasted for more than 20 years. Was there someone still standing in the rain? Another flash of lightning streaked across the sky, and Ben disappeared, replaced by an old woman over 90 years old, his grandmother. And it was me, a person who was no longer young. Under the flash of lightning, I realized that the old woman was still wearing the glasses from that year. The old woman's cloudy eyes suddenly became strangely clear. Her spirit came to me every night to tell me the truth story. I trembled, reached out, grabbed her wrinkled hand and stared into her eyes, asking what was the truth of that year. Lily and Ben had always been good friends. Ben's parents left, and he only lived with me. Perhaps because of his unfortunate life, he was different from the other children in the neighbor, always having strange and imaginative thoughts. Lily's mother always kept her locked in the house, and Ben always secretly came to play with her, became the only bridge that connected that poor girl to the outside world. One day, a few men broke into their house. They ransacked every corner and finally Lily was sold to a circus troupe. It wasn't until Lily was 14 that the troupe brought her to a city to perform. They met again when he was studying at a university there. Only then she came to find out that not long after she disappeared, her mother also passed away. Just as Lily wanted to end everything, Ben decided to bring these criminals into daylight. In 1998, after graduating from college, Ben returned to town. He used the money he saved from his school days to buy a camera, contacted Lily, and told her he had a plan for revenge. At the same time, the circus troupe began planning their tour for that year. Lily suggested during the meeting that the people in Pineville love watching the circus, and that they should definitely hold a performance there. After 10 years, Lily returned to the town for the first time. Nobody in the town remembered her. On the first night back home, Lily secretly met with Ben. He said that if the criminals in the town had ever been connected to the circus troupe, they would definitely gather when the troupe came to town to perform. At that time, he would use a camera and a tape recorder to record all the evidence and catch them all in one fell swoop. And Ben was right. The troupe leader drove Lily and her master to a nightclub in the city. She was forced to pour him wine while being plied with drinks until she was soft and drunk. That night, Lily was once again assaulted. She no longer even felt pain because she knew that Ben had recorded everything. After tonight, she would no longer be a victim but an avenger. She would drag those villains down to hell and reclaim her freedom and life. But they failed. Lily woke up from a drunken stupor and found herself back at the circus troupe. She was still hoping that today Ben would bring all the evidence to find her. Then he appeared, but he was escorted by them. Everything that happened that night was just a trap. He didn't record anything. On the contrary, he was captured by them. Once the last hope had collapsed, what was more frightening than death. After that, they beat Lily mercilessly and forced Ben to use a camera to take pictures of her in a state of humiliation, and then took the film. They threatened him that if he dared to help Lily again, they would use those photos to send him to prison. At this point, the voice of Ben's grandmother began to choke up, her throat trembling, pausing for a long time. I looked at her face and only saw deep sorrow and inner turmoil. I began to doubt whether she was truly possessed by a ghost or if all of this was something she deliberately fabricated. But the old woman was over 90 years old. How could she have orchestrated all of this herself? At that moment, I no longer cared whether Lily's ghost was real or not. I just wanted to know what the truth of that year really was, and what a huge mistake I had made. She had just told me about the night of July 13th, and the day after that was the day she self-immolated and died. Time passed by, minute by minute, second by second. The rain outside had stopped long ago, and the sky began to dawn. My wife must have woken up. She called me several times, but I turned off the cell phone. I couldn't let myself be disturbed. If I missed this night, I would be even further from the truth. I poured a glass of water for Ben's grandmother and waited for her to regain her strength. The long night of storytelling had exhausted the old woman. She told me to leave first and then lay straight down on the bed, sinking into a deep sleep. I remained sitting in place, my hands clenched into fists. Was that all there was to the story of that year? No evidence was obtained. Was everything in vain? No, it couldn't be just that. If they took Ben's film roll, then why did I find photos in his camera when I arrested him? Was my arrest of him also part of someone's plan? Who were they, really? Suddenly, I remembered the only clue I had found more than 20 years ago and then abandoned. That year, I only investigated up to the post office and saw that all the mail records had been completely erased. So, I gave up. But if they, as Lily said, were really closely related to the circus troupe, there must have been financial transactions between them. According to regulations, bank transaction records are stored for 30 years. In those days, everything was recorded in paper ledgers, and it was very difficult to secretly destroy them. The town back then had only one community bank. If I could find the transaction ledger from 1998, I might be able to track down the circus troupe's financial partner. I immediately returned home, hurriedly explained a few things to my wife, grabbed my car keys, and drove straight to the bank. Fortunately, I still had some old documents in the car, so I could pretend I was still on duty. Upon arrival, after verifying my identity, the bank led me into the storage room, brought out a huge box of documents, and said that they were all the records from 1998, telling me to find them myself. I rummaged through the records while checking the circus troupe's performance schedule from that year to deduce the transaction time. I searched until late afternoon, and finally, I saw the name, Silver Star Variety Troupe, appear in the documents. And when I saw the name of the other partner in the transaction, I couldn't help but shiver. When I returned to the shack where Ben's grandmother lived, it was almost midnight. I pushed the door open, and in front of me was still the black and white photo of Ben. The old woman seemed to have anticipated my return and was sitting on the bed staring at me. But this time, I didn't come to find her. I glanced at her and then scanned the room, saying, "I have figured out the whole truth. If you trust me, please come out, Lily." After a few seconds of deadly silence, I heard footsteps behind me. A woman emerged from the darkness. Earlier today, when I was looking up the Silver Star Circus Troupe's performance schedule from that year on my cell phone, I happened to discover that a website still had photos of their old performance program. I just scrolled through it a little, but when I saw a line of text, my pupils immediately dilated. In the list of performance programs from that year, there was an act called Twin Sisters Aerial Ballet. My scalp began to tingle, and everything that had happened over the past 20 years suddenly became clear. I looked at the woman who was stepping out of the darkness. Sure enough, she looked exactly like Lily. It was just that after more than 20 years, the woman, who was nearly 40, had been stripped of her former innocence and purity by time. I had thought many times about what I should say first if I had the chance to meet her again. But in this moment I could only say one thing: I'm sorry, I'm too late. I didn't expect the person behind everything to be Thomas Grant. Thomas came from Pineville, and from the early 90s, he had risen to a city-level leadership position and was now even transferred to another province for work. More importantly, I remembered very clearly that he was the same age as me. And recently, after retiring, he also returned to Pineville to live, just like me. She chose this time to meet me because before, Thomas had a high position and power and could easily manipulate everything and bury the truth. But now that he had retired and returned to town, after more than 20 years of waiting, she knew this was the best opportunity to bring him to light. The woman in front of me did not answer, but her eyes confirmed everything I had just said. I continued. At the same time, I also confirmed one thing. Yesterday, you told me that back then Ben didn't leave any evidence, but in reality, he did, didn't he? You still have the evidence in your hands now. Yesterday, you used his grandmother's words to hide it from me because you couldn't be sure if you could trust me. But today, you have appeared directly, and I can understand that you have put your trust in me. If that's the case, I want to ask two things. Why did Thomas target you two sisters? And what exactly happened on the night of July 14, 1998? Who was the person who died? The woman in front of me finally let go of all her defenses and began to tell the complete truth. It was the lighting that night that allowed my resurrection and the world to witness my sister Lucy's death. We were 7 when our father, who lost everything gambling to the villainous Thomas, used us as collateral for a debt. After he died, Thomas's people came for us. Our only comfort was a boy named Ben. We were sold to the Silver Star Variety Circus, becoming twin performers, mindless machines. While I accepted our fate, Lucy was driven by revenge. She reconnected with Ben, and they planned to expose Thomas and the troupe. Ben, disguised as a waiter, recorded their confessions and secretly took pictures during a performance night. But he grew too close to Lucy. Our master noticed and recognized Ben, realizing everything. I was rushed out and strangled, barely escaping with my life. When I awoke, my master lied, saying Lucy was sold, but I saw the truth in Ben's eyes. As he was forced to take my picture, he gave me a secret signal, pointing the way. Following his signal into the night, I found Ben by a wall covered in grass, digging a hole. He was panicking, believing Thomas had taken his grandmother as punishment for the failed plan. Together we dug, and I touched something soft and sticky, a piece of Lucy's bloody leg. Overcome by despair, I held her body silently. Ben pulled a plastic bag from her body, the film roll and cassette tape of evidence. He had hidden them inside her, explaining, "This is what Lucy traded her life for. I won't let her die in vain." He knew that if Lucy's body was found in the town square, it would be a murder case, and they would need a scapegoat. That, he believed, was their best chance to bargain for his grandmother's life. At this point, Lily was drenched in tears. She held out her hand and gave me an envelope. "Everything is here. Officer Harold, these things are the price of 2 lives. It's been 27 years. Can you help me complete the last step?" I carefully accepted it and put the envelope into my inner pocket. I took out my cell phone and booked the earliest ticket to the next city for tomorrow morning. Currently, the state investigation team is working there. This is the safest way. I asked Lily if she wanted to come with me. She shook her head. For more than 20 years, I have only dared to appear at night, becoming a ghost in the mouths of the people of Pineville. So, let me continue to be a ghost. And it will also make the people of Pineville never forget what a horrific crime happened here. The next day, after the inspection team confirmed the evidence, they immediately began to plan the operation. I stood silently for a long time in front of the gate of the place where the inspection team was working. Had the tragedy that lasted for 27 years really ended? Although I knew that Ben would finally be cleared of his wrongful conviction. The criminal gang led by Thomas Grant would have to bow down to the law. But in my heart, I was still vague. Last night before I left, I couldn't help but ask Lily, "How did you and Ben finally dispose of Lucy's body?" Lily helped Ben's grandmother up, looked at the moonlight outside the window, and whispered, "When Ben and I brought Lucy's body back to the town square that night, my tears were gone." The circus tent glowed faintly nearby. Lucy lay pale and lifeless, a discarded doll. Looking at Ben, I knew there was no other choice. "To save your grandmother?" he asked, exhausted. "My time is short, and for someone like Thomas, this is the only way." I took a breath, knelt, and held her hand. "Then for the last time, help me give her one last performance." Before dawn, we hid her body in a storage room, covered by an old rug. Ben gave me an envelope, telling me to hide the evidence inside. "If you can, take care of my grandmother and keep the evidence safe. From now on, you can only walk alone." On July 14, 1998, it was Lucy's and my final show. That afternoon, I bought gasoline and a lighter. While everyone prepped, I quietly dragged her body, soaked in gasoline, to a corner under the stage and covered her with a red, flammable rug, blending it with the others. I poured gasoline on my performance dress, wrapped small stones in shredded paper, and tied them to my waist. I was ready. That night, amidst the cheers, I flew into the air under the spotlight, wearing fireproof clothing beneath my costume. It was the last performance, and I spun frantically. Lucy, who always took the dangerous parts, lay below. When I circled directly above her, I lit my dress. The flames erupted, and the spotlight followed the falling fire, as the audience screamed. The rope immediately pulled me backstage. The shift in light and my dark fireproof clothing made me invisible. As I landed, I untied the ropes and vanished into the panicked crowd. I looked back at the blaze, Lucy, completing her final performance. Goodbye, Lucy. The ones who destroyed us, someday, in the deep darkness, they will definitely see the dance of revenge from hell.